We're recording this on December 20th, and we are here with the informer who's been with us for a while now. But we kind of wanted to do something that was a bit of a primer and try to condense it as much as we could into a 2-hour show, knowing that also you folks would have questions as well. Now, I-Man?
Yep.
I think we might have. Well, let me do this. If we can pop this along, because we don't have to explain everything right here.
Right.
I mean, your works do that, and we're not trying to sucker anybody into buying anything. But let's face it, folks. I mean, you can't break it all down like the history of the world in 2 hours.
No,
no,
that's impossible.
But let's lay this out. The British Board of Trade. I ask you this. It was around. I mean, this thing has been around for forever. What was it? And are we looking at the Fed, our Fed, as being an extension of that British Board of Trade?
No, it's actually an extension of the Exchequer of the Crown, which is the Bank of England.
Okay.
In other words, when they installed that over here, that was already installed as the Bank of England.
Okay. All right.
And, it's pretty hard. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to bring, it's very hard to understand this because the Constitution is written in very highly technical language. And most people say, oh, no, we created it, and the average person should be able to understand it. Well, it isn't. Because I'm going to read you an excerpt from Whiting. He was Lincoln's War Power Solicitor General. Now, this is right out of Whiting's book. And
all right, what year would this be also, I-Man?
1861.
Okay.
The book is published 1861, 2, 3, 4, and then a few years after that. Now, this is not my words. This is Whiting's own words. Technical language to be construed technically. The language of the Constitution is peculiar. It is technical. It shows on the face of it an intention to limit the technical operation of attainders, not to limit the scope or extent of legislative penalties. If the authors of the Constitution meant to say that Congress should pass no law punishing treason by attainder or by its consequences, viz., forfeiture of estate, corruption of blood, they would in plain terms have said so. Everybody thinks that's what it means.
All right.
So there would have been an end to the attainder's penalties, as there was an end to bill of attainder. Instead of saying, quote, Congress shall have the powers to declare the punishment of treason, but shall not impose the penalties of attainder upon the offender, they said, and here's what they really said, Congress shall have the power to declare the punishment of treason, no change, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. End of quote. This phraseology has reference only to technical effect of attainder. The, quote, a working of forfeitures, end quote, is a phrase used by lawyers to show the legal result or effect which arises from a certain set of facts. Note, since the publication of the 7th edition has been decided by Underwood J. in the Eastern District Court of the U.S. for Virginia in the case of U.S. versus Lantham, first, that the Confiscation Act above cited is authorized by the Constitution. Second, that by terms of that act, dated July 17, 1862, Chapter 195, as modified by the Joint Resolution of July 27, 1862, number 63, the punishment of treason is not limited to forfeiture of the life estate of the offender, and is not required to be so limited by the Constitution, but the forfeiture extends to the entire estate of fee simple. End of Whiting's quote. Right there. End of fee simple. We pay a fee, a simple fee, when you buy property, because it's always in fee simple. Means you never own the property, will never own the property, ever.
All right, and I understand that, and we've stated that.
And that's why it says Tenants in common to what?
What?
Now,
okay, now...
Here is where the common comes in.
Okay.
The state is the other common because they are a party to it, and they have insured their property, and that's why you have to get title insurance.
Okay, are you talking about the state as being the overlaying state?
Yes.
All right, so if you're in Florida, North Carolina...
The fiction state. In other words, this state or the state of North Carolina in all capitals. That's the corporate state overlying the land mass that rises above the land mass and the water and whatnot.
All right, so what we're dealing with is an invisible but corporate...
Yeah, corporate entity.
Right, and I said before overlay, and
Yeah.
and I think Randy in the chat room said that's beautiful because that's what the UN uses all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I mean, so this irony should not be lost on us because the point is they're telling us, you idiots, you think you own it, but you don't.
That's right. Now, that's why no one can ever get a allodial title. Can never happen. Now, here's one thing. I'm going to read this direct quote because everybody knows about Obama and not being a citizen and all this, and everybody heard Euphoria, the guy in Jersey. Okay. Now, here's a constitutional requirement for the president. Now, you got to read this. Remember, Whiting said it's very technical, highly technical. The words that you, a citizen or a citizen of the United States, comma, at the time of the adoption of this Constitution. You got that?
All right.
When was the Constitution adopted?
1783, 7? 87, okay.
Comma, shall be eligible for the office of president, comma, neither shall any person be eligible to that office shall have not attained the age of 35 and been 14 years a resident within the United States. Stop. Now tell me, 1787, add 14 years, and when can that first president be elected?
How many years after the fact?
Since 1787. Add 14 years to 1787, and what year can the president be first installed under constitutional principle?
Well, you're looking at what? Just across the, into 1800s?
1801.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Okay, now, let's go. And here, for the requirements for Congress are 7 years a citizen, and the Senate, 9 years a citizen. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, now, the historical fact is the United States never existed before 1787 when it was created. How could it? It was all Confederacy, wasn't it?
All right, so 1783, the Crown just said, okay, you guys are states, but that really didn't incorporate the United States until 1787.
No, they were colonies because if you go and pull the original 13's Constitution, which I did, they all say colonies. They didn't say states.
All right, so 1787, we've got a corporate United States.
Right, 1787.
Okay.
Now, so the historical fact is that technically it never existed until the year 1787 when it was adopted. The Constitution was adopted only by those few that drafted it. It was never put to the people to ratify it or adopt it because the Crown dictated the parameters for the Founding Fathers so they could still control their property, the Crown's property, that was never given up by the Revolutionary War. Now, here is the membership of the first Congress convened under the Constitution. And I pulled this out from the library. President of the Senate, John Adams. President Pro Tem, John Langdon. Speaker of the House, Frederick Muhlenberg. Members, 22 to 26 senators and 59 to 64 representatives. That's all there was. That's all the people in the Constitution. Wasn't me, wasn't you, wasn't our relatives way back yonder. The first meeting was March 4th, 1789 to September the 29th, 1797. They met 3 times. Now, I went back and I says, okay, because Obama, you can thank Obama for my getting into this. I had to go online and I found from the government's own history of presidents document found on the internet, and you can't find it everything in one section. They do not tell you. They hide it. Here's what it said. George Washington was born in Westmoreland County, Virginia, February 22nd, 1732. He was the first U.S. president serving from 1789 to 1797, but was born a British subject.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the same way for John Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, William Henry Harrison, and
Van Buren.
Van Buren, and all those people. So now I got that from the publishing company source that quoted everything that I had to go in and find another one. And it gave all the presidents, but it gave little-known facts. And this is where it comes in, and it says, Martin Van Buren, born December 5th, 1782. Uh-oh, he was born 5 years before 1787.
Before the colonies became states.
Yeah.
Therefore, he's a British subject.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it says, now listen to this. He was the 8th president. He was also the only president not to have spoken English as a first language, having grown up speaking Dutch,
yeah.
And was the first natural-born U.S. citizen to become president. They lied.
Right.
They totally lied. Because look at 1780 and created the United States. So how could he be called a citizen of the United States 5 years before it was created? It's an impossibility.
No, but the point is that this
people don't look at it this way.
No, but I mean this whole thing about Obama now is which you're saying. It's like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, that's why he would come in, and that's why the courts would say it. Now listen to this. William Henry Harrison. Harrison was born in Benjamin Harrison, the signer of the Declaration of Independence. Harrison was in fact a scion of the Virginia planter aristocracy. He was born February 9, 1773, Charles County, Virginia, born of Benjamin Harrison and Elizabeth Bassett. Harrison was the last president who was born a British subject. Ah, right? No. Now, let's go on. I said, so now, let's go on and find out who was the real first president of the United States that actually could hold office according to the Constitution. It was John Tyler. Born March 29, 1790, 3 years after the creation of the United States, in Charles City, County, Virginia.
Which means Virginia at that time was now a state.
Right.
Okay.
He was the 10th U.S. president serving from 1841 to 1845. Now, he was born a few years after the Revolution in 1790, so he still meets the criteria. And he, believe it or not, was against Andrew Jackson, and he represented everything in politics that Tyler was against, especially the new voting power of the West when Jackson's government attempted to restrict slavery in new states west of Missouri. Now, Tyler was totally against it, and so much so that he refused to allow anybody who didn't have money to vote. Goes right back to the original where you had to have 50 pounds sterling or the equivalent in land before you could vote. Therefore, you could never be an elector. Therefore, the common man never created the Constitution. That's proof right there.
Right.
Now, so now we come on to with the House of Reps and everything like that, and of course the technical language, I went through that. This is all what I have in my book. Now, what I like is the quote is, when a well-packaged web of lies has been sold gradually to the masses over generations, the truth will seem utterly preposterous and its speaker a raving lunatic. Dresden James. That's why a lot of people look at what I write and the Informer as raving lunatics. Nah, you can't do that.
Right.
B. Kraft attacks us constantly. Well, we ain't Brits, and, well, all right, we ain't Brits, but we're controlled by them.
Right.
And just like